Everyone has seen Frankenstein, or at least some weird, twisted version of it being satirized or just used as a vague reference to a big monster guy that may or may not be immortal, infinitely strong, and made of an assortment of body parts taken from various other corpses. However, it's not particularly surprising that Mary Shelley's novel has had a few thousand instances of creative interpretation over the last 200 years of its existence, and the latest iteration by Guillermo del Toro steps much closer to the original than the bolt-neck green dude you typically see. And with Del Toro at the helm, you're all but guaranteed to have plenty of those classic moments where you momentarily consider if you've just been scarred for life by what you witnessed. The movie opens on a ship trapped in the frozen Arctic tundra while attempting to navigate to the North Pole on some kind of ice-collecting trade mission. A guy that looks like Mads Mikkelsen but is actually his brother Lars uses the power ordained by having the longest beard to captain the struggling crew. But when they hear a giant explosion in this desolate environment, they run over to find a badly wounded Victor Frankenstein and soon to follow a not Frankenstein monster roaring in pursuit. After they bring him on board, that angry guy catches up and proceeds to violently extract the living essence from every dude that runs up on him while casually absorbing numerous rounds from several old-timey rifles. Eventually, after like half a dozen guys get gruesomely annihilated and for some reason people keep thinking they're the ones that won't be torn in half, they get a cool-ass blunderbuss and blast him into the ice, sinking into the abyss, at least temporarily. But all of this commotion gives old Victor time to tell the story about how he discovered the ability to bring corpses to life with red battery things, but Ralph Ineson yelled at him so hard that he had to leave and give up on his dream. Thankfully, Christoph Waltz swoops in to save the day with his munitions fortune and sets Vicky Frankenboy up in the most reasonable mad scientist tower on a cliff that he could find, and they set to work collecting corpses for a montage of grotesque anatomy lessons. This is all interspersed with a strange love triangle between Victor, his brother, and Mia Goth, who also played their mother who died like 30 seconds after being introduced earlier, and they won't even mention how weird that is. Yet moments before that fated moment of lightning bringing life to a pile of body parts, you find out Christoph Waltz is dying of syphilis and funded this whole project so that he could be cobbled together into a pile of rotting flesh and live on presumably until they discovered penicillin and he could stop drinking mercury. But Vic isn't on board and says it won't work while waiting until the last possible second to climb a rain-soaked stone tower in a lightning storm to put up a silver rod he could have done literally any time before that. But Christoph is pissed and tries to take one of his conductors, only to lose his balance in the struggle and slide down one of the random death holes in this murder tower to splatter below. The subsequently bent conductor leads to the experiment seemingly failing and some cool hallucinations, but Victor wakes up to see his homunculus alive and in the form and short shorts of a 1960s basketball star. After teaching him exactly one word, Victor, and immediately chaining him up in the water dungeon below, he gives up on his lifelong project and decides to blow it all up, ultimately leading to him getting his leg torn off just for fun. However, our basketball monster escapes down an awesome built-in water slide and presumably survives the destruction. Here, we return to the ice boat to witness our new favorite monster showing up once again, but this time they just let him in and he gets to tell his side of the story, conveniently right from where V. Frank left off. After washing up from his water park adventure, he starts exploring the British countryside, but before he can live out his Disney princess dreams, some random people start shooting him because that's obviously the best option when encountering a random stranger in the woods. But being unkillable, he wanders off and ends up exactly where those would-be murderers live. But instead of murdering them back, he takes up residence in a part of their house they apparently never go into and lives there for months, secretly helping out the family so much they think he's a friendly ghost and leave him presents. During all of this, while watching through a glory hole, he learns to speak from the teachings of the ancient blind grandfather of the house, Walter Frey. Eventually, the rest of the family leaves to sell some sheep and murder some wolves, but Walter Frey stays behind and gets to meet Frank face to face, immediately striking up that classic blind man and monster friendship. He teaches him to read all of the books a mountain family has, and Frankie uses the knowledge inside to gain the depressing power of introspection and desires to know of his origin, which leads him back to the mostly exploded tower to conveniently find all of Vic's unexploded paperwork documenting his creation. Yet upon returning to the cabin, those mean old wolves come back and make a light snack of Walter Frey, prompting a canine calamity where they realize far sooner than the humans that they probably shouldn't fuck with this giant dude. When the rest of the family returns and decides once again to shoot a random guy who just killed a bunch of wolves in their house, Frankie temporarily dies once more. However, this time, upon reviving, he uses all of his newfound knowledge to go visit Victor conveniently on the day of his brother's wedding and sneaks in to ask him for a side piece to be immortal with. But this mad scientist decides he just wants to be a regular scientist and expects the dude that he made to just move on. Instead, the big boy moves right on to throwing him across the room a few times before the mom/unrequited lover/brother's fiance/one of two people ever to be nice to Franken Jr. runs in and gets caught in the crossfire. In the subsequent death scenes of most of the other main characters and a dramatic nose pinch, Frank tells Vic, "Hey, you want to chase me?" And he does, all the way to the Arctic, leading us full circle back to the boat in Beards Mickelson. After everyone's had their story time, Victor finally agrees to die and tells Frank to go live his immortal life out there in the world, and he agrees to do that while forgiving Victor for being a giant douchebag for essentially all of his short existence. And in this important lesson of putting life before crazy shit, with Frank's help, they turn that bad boat around and head back home while that monster-turned-manster heads off into the polar sunrise to claim the fame of establishing a trade route with the North Pole. This modern movement of films revisiting classic monsters has largely been well received and, from what I've seen, pretty enjoyable. Yet, unlike Nosferatu, the 2.5 hours of Frankenstein felt much less like 2.5 hours. While it's not as much of a cerebral film and keeps the metaphors pretty close to the surface, it maintains a solid pace and enough action that even a relatively normal person like myself doesn't feel like going to the bathroom just to feel something significant. Guillermo del Toro has always been great at writing screenplays that are compelling but also work as great platforms for cool visual effects and interesting characters. Oscar Isaac continues his reign of being the king of totally weird guys with dubious intentions that people trust for some reason and nails it once again. The Creature, played by Jacob Elordi, surprised me with both how deep the character was and how wonderful the actor was in the role, both with the physicality of it and with the unique delivery in his scenes. And even though I've never seen any of her previous movies, Mia Goth would shine every time she was on the screen in her dual-role adventure. There were a few odd things about Frankenstein that bothered me after watching it, like the inconsistent nature of the creature's resiliency, the need to repeatedly revisit the strange jargon for how these experiments were supposed to work, and the odd flip-flops of cat and mouse between Victor and the creature at the end of the movie. But none of that really detracted from the flow enough to think about in the moment. An incredible cast brought a classic piece of literature to a modern audience led by an Oscar-winning director, and it delivers exactly what you would expect from that collective. So that's why Frankenstein is getting the abbreviated score of good. And if you'd like to see more hot takes, warm satire, and tepid commentary about games and movies, like this video, send a life-giving lightning bolt to mega supporter Adam Watke and check out more Abbreviated Reviews.